we're looking specifically today at reading skills. We're really aware of this reading gap and want to show you what we've done to support you. We've got lots of examples of variety of texts, including online texts and audiobooks with lots of questioning. And we partner with Philosophy for Children, P4C. Many of you may use that in your schools. But our focus today is on vocabulary, and it's on reading, and reading in the curriculum in particular. So I'm sure you are familiar with the language around tiered vocabulary and the different words that we use in our curriculum. So we can think of this as tier 1, basic words that are commonly used in spoken language. So in the background there, you can see this is a scene from ancient Egypt, from one of our themes. And we could have some everyday language. I can see a tree, person, people, animal, everyday language. Then we might have some academic vocabulary, which we see appear frequently across different content areas. I've used the example here, pyramid. You might be introducing that quite low down in Key Stage 1 within the school when you're thinking about your 3D shapes. We might be thinking about pyramids. But then we think of more technical vocabulary, our tier 3 vocabulary, your low frequency words that occur with very specific domains. So here, as our children are learning about ancient Egypt, they may then become exposed to the word sarcophagus. I'm not going to say that again. I think I just about got it right first time, but it's very specific language. And we're incredibly aware of how important it is to teach the language, to teach that skill. We may even, dare I mention Ofsted, but have somebody go into a classroom and ask your children, what are you learning today? They might say, oh, we're doing ancient Egypt. That's interesting. Can you tell me what the word ancient is? And how many children and teachers, and I'm probably guilty of this in my own career, have taught ancient Egypt without unpicking the word ancient or ancient Egyptian civilization? That's a tier 3 word there. That's technical vocabulary, civilization. Are we ensuring that the children understand the language we're using? So we're going to start with an activity. I don't know about you, it's been a very Monday today. It's been one of those days. So we'll get going. We're going to go back to one of those YouTube videos. And I'd like you, on a post-it, a little scrap of paper, to think about the language we're going to hear in this snippet, this video, and just jot down any language that you think is probably tier 3. So it's very subject specific.
Let me tell you a few of its secrets. The pyramid allows the dead pharaoh to join the gods in heaven. After his life here on earth, he goes to his rightful place above us all. How does the pyramid do this, you ask? Well, within the burial chamber of the Great Pyramid, there are 2 narrow vents cut out of the stone. Is this just to air the place out? No. You see, through these gaps you can see some important signs in the night sky. Constellations of stars. It's a little window into heaven. The pharaoh's soul will move through these gaps to go to its eternal home. In this way, the pyramid is like a stepladder to heaven. Those who worship the sun god Ra more than any of the other gods will tell you that the pyramid is also like a sunbeam which the pharaoh's soul will climb to meet Ra himself in the sky.
Okay, thank you. That's great. So that's a snippet of the type of the video content that we have inside Inspire. And what I'd like you to do, I always count on everyone being really brave for me, and I'm sure you will. What do you think could have been tier 3 vocabulary? Pop it in the chat. Let's see if we can get some examples of just in that small section of the video. Did we see some examples of some technical language, very specific to ancient Egypt? Okay, so brilliant. Someone said their constellations. Absolutely. We're not going to be using that in our everyday language. Vent, yeah, and vent's interesting because we might have sometimes words that we're not sure whether we're going to put them at tier 2 or tier 3, especially when it's specific to an area in history. For example, like this, we had that burial chamber. Yeah, excellent. We've got someone there talking about the sun god, Ra. Ra is very specific here. You know, prior to learning about ancient Egypt, what does Ra mean? I'm not sure that we'd get that that's the sun god. Lovely. Someone else there again bringing up the burial chamber. Really appreciate all your feedback. So we see that our curriculum is really rich in vocabulary. And we use videos quite often in Inspire Education as a method of sharing that vocabulary. Why it's specifically relevant right now that we should focus on this is all linked to school closure. We're going to have a little look at the EEF, the Education Endowment Foundation, and what they have said with regard to improving literacy and outcomes. We've got some really important messaging here, and I've highlighted the second point. We need a balanced and engaging approach to developing reading, which integrates both decoding and comprehension skills. It's an interesting point there that's made. We know this. According to the EEF, good literacy skills provide us with the building blocks, not just for academic success, but fulfilling careers and rewarding lives. But despite our very best efforts, our disadvantaged children in England, they're still twice as likely as their classmates from more advantaged homes to be leaving primary schools without reaching the expected levels in reading and writing. If you have the opportunity to have a look at this support, the guidance focuses on the pedagogy, and it offers some really practical evidence-based recommendations about effective teaching and effective teaching of reading. And if we go to the next slide here, we'll see that we absolutely need to have a blended approach to the teaching of reading. So of course, and we do this so well lower down the school, we must have that fidelity to phonics and teaching children to read. But that's not actually going to be sufficient to developing confident and competent readers. We've got to have motivation and engagement, and we need to ensure that we're using different medias. So lots of different genres and topics and breadth of text. And I think what we can do with Inspire, and we do this very well, there's an element of the ability to, I suppose, in some ways, trick our children into reading. I shared in an earlier webinar that when we had some of our Year 5 pupils back in, and they were our most reluctant readers, and they very honestly said they'd spent most of lockdown playing a certain computer game, and we all gasped. When we assessed their reading, there still had been some progress, and it is because so long as there's exposure to text and reading and problem solving, we can still get our reluctant readers reading. And we want to show that, and we want to show how that can happen elsewhere in the curriculum. Let's have some thinking time. So I'm going to ask you about reading in your school. So the first question, I suppose, is, do you prioritise reading in your school? And I know from the fact that you're here, of course you do. And no doubt you do that very well, probably through reading schemes, regular one-to-one reading, group reading, guided reading. What we want to consider more specifically today is whether children have a range of media and a wide genre of texts across the school. and across the curriculum. And with that in mind, is the vocabulary development in geography, history, and science also high on the agenda for the school? And do children have the opportunity to be introduced to a range of texts and a range of reading experiences that support the development of comprehension and inference skills? So we've asked this of most of our attendees to consider, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident we're feeling in schools reading across the curriculum. Perhaps just think about history and geography, or your humanities, your afternoon, your broader curriculum package, and consider how confident you feel that reading is still being taught and that you're making the links there. And we'll see those results. Okay, that's interesting. Luke, I think you'll agree with me. Have we ever seen a score above 5 on a webinar?
Nope, not yet. Not above 5.
And that's what we've got. We have got that as an average. It has been lower, but we know that that's where staff are starting to feel the struggle. They recognise the impact of reading elsewhere, but when we talk about our wider curriculum and our broad and balanced curriculum, we're not seeing the strength of reading that we perhaps should. And hopefully by the end of this webinar, you'll be able to consider how it can be improved in your school and what we can do to support that. So I'm going to hand over to Luke, and Luke's going to show you some of our lesson plans. So within Inspire, within our online resource, we've got a wealth of lesson plans, but in each and every plan, we also have reading. And I think, are we going to stick in ancient Egypt here, Luke? Fantastic.
Yeah, we'll stick with ancient, yeah.
Let's have a look at how we can teach reading through ancient Egyptian civilization. Thanks, Luke.
Thanks, Tara. Hello, everyone. Good to see you online. So as Tara's mentioned, we've gone through this tiered vocabulary. We start off with that high frequency vocab, and we come then to a low frequency that's not often used. And what we've got to do as educators is make sure that tiered vocabulary doesn't become tired vocabulary. We've got to be exposing those children to new material and embedding the meaning of them. You know, one of the biggest assessments on reading when they come to year 6 is the meaning of words. I think it's something like 20% of their mark is based upon the meaning of vocabulary. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you some of the vocab we have in our theme, Ancient Egypt, because that's what Tara's been showing us. So I'll share my screen and
yeah, that's great.
Thank you. Right, what we're looking at here is our knowledge organizer on Ancient Egypt. So it just gives a breakdown exactly on what to expect throughout the unit of study. If you look at the bottom here, here's our thematic vocabulary. And these are our third tier vocab. You'll notice that they're long words that they would not often use. You see, they're not going to often use these words dynasty in their day-to-day language. And that's what higher tier vocabulary is. It's getting them to expose to this really in-depth meaning of what vocabulary is within context. Now, the thing is, according to many studies, children from age 7, from year 3, should be learning between 2,000 to 3,000 words a year. That's an extraordinary amount of vocab that they need to be learning. Now, obviously, those children aren't going to be using those in their day-to-day sentences, are they? I mean, I can't even string 200 words together in a sentence, but they need to be exposing themselves to this rich vocab. And the only way we can do that as practitioners to reach that higher threshold is through technical vocabulary. Things like embalming, things like dynasty, things like undercover in a rainforest. These are the technical words that expose themselves through different subjects that they're going to access through a theme or a topic, words within context. So I've got a little activity. It's only a short one. Again, you're going to be typing in the responses, but we're going to pick one word, and I'm going to use the word embalming. Okay, so right at here, the word embalming. How many words relate to that one word, embalm? So just type a response or write it down or have a little think. How many words relate to that one single word, embalm? So if there's any responses coming, we can have them read out. I can't see the chat, so I'm going to
Well, someone's gone for 7, but they've not told me an example of the 7. Oh, we've got wrapping here.
Wrapping.
Preserving, excellent. Oh, you can tell I'm a teacher. Yeah, excellent house point. That was a good one, preserving.
So yeah, we can see we got preserving, we've got probably mummifying is one of them as well. And what we're going to find is that...
Yeah, we've got 2 people saying mummifying here. That's coming through.
Okay. And you might get other things like death. It's a pretty morbid word to use, but it's related, isn't it? It's related into that category of embalming, but it's within context. It's the context of mummifying and Egypt that they're going to access this idea of embalming. What we find is this higher tier vocabulary is a bit like an umbrella. You've got the big word at the top, and all reigning underneath it is a raft of other vocab words. It becomes like a lexicon, doesn't it? And that's what higher tier vocabulary does. It's the highest pinnacle of a raft of words. And what we have here is that 3rd tier vocab right in our knowledge organizer. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you some of our lessons, because vocab interweaves itself in all of our lessons. So if I go onto our knowledge web, and this was done in a previous webinar, so if you saw the previous webinar, this web will make sense to you. All this, what you're looking at is our lessons. So I'm going to pick one. We'll go on to actually a lesson that involves the video that we accessed and we had a little look at, which is this one here, religious importance. So if I go on that, and you can see here, this is the video we saw. Here's our lesson plan, and underneath here is all the key vocabulary that video entails. So historical, periods, pyramid, religious, pharaoh, heaven, constellation, burial chamber, vent, Ra, soul. And some of those words came out in our responses. So what we have here in our lesson plan is the key vocabulary, because let's face it, one of the biggest issues, according to statistics with teaching, is knowledge of subject. We might not even have the lexicon in our head, because what we are as primary school teachers, we're told to be masters of all trades, but we're not. We're masters of few and a jack of all trades. Many of us haven't taken a history degree. Many of us are not Egyptologists, so we don't know that vocab. But on our lesson plans, we make sure that the vocab is at your fingertips on the particular lesson you want to deliver to the children. So there's that. I'll show you another one. We'll go on to...
Before you disappear there, Luke, something that I jumped out to me when I first saw the resource. Every single lesson actually does have a short read. And we talked about the benefit of these, didn't we, during remote learning, home learning. We can always give out the reading in advance of a lesson. So if you found yourself in a situation, I think it's 1 in 6 schools now have been having to close down a year group, you can set, perfect, here's another one on the River Nile. See that right hand column with the activity sheets? Every lesson has a short read, a task involved, and I just wanted to point that out to people, because as a teacher, that's invaluable. The information is there. And when you said about not having the historical knowledge as the teacher, if you have a quick read of that before your lesson, you're good to go.
Yeah, no, that's great. We'll be coming to short reads a little later towards the end. So thank you for priming us on that. Again, I've just shown another lesson here. This is the River Nile. This will be what they'll be looking at on the resource. There's a stimulus, and in our training sessions, we'll show you how to access all the stimuli for each particular lesson. And you can see here, there's another video. There's videos everywhere. And again, on the content, on the reading, right here, on the stimulus, the children will be accessing all this vocabulary. So everything is cross-referenced. Every single thing, all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. So when you're watching the video, when you're reading our material, when you're going on one of the kind of interactive games with the children, the vocab that the lesson plan puts at the forefront of your eyes is the vocab that will be spoken and read by the children. So that's the vocab. I could go further, but I'm always being told off for going over time. So I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna pass you on to Tara, who's going to talk about the next step.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Luke. So you saw there an example of actually a sneak peek of 2 different lesson plans. Okay, and they were lesson plans within our ancient Egypt scene. What we have now is a scene I'm going to share with you for our year 5, year 6, depending on where you study local history and study the Victorians. And this is an example of an ebook. So we talked right at the start there in the EF about the genres and the medias. This can actually be read interactively. We have an ebook from the Industrial Revolution. And an example of this text here, I want to just talk through what you would get and what this text provides. So we've got a wide range of language to develop written text in different forms, active engagement with different media. So we can show you shortly, this is clickable, there is audio. We've got the opportunity here to read an information text. It's not narrative, it's information, it's what the children need to know for an understanding of this period in history. And there's opportunities to apply strategies, talk through effective questioning, and engage our readers thinking about language choice. And we do have here lots of tier 2 words that are really valuable, and they'll appear across the curriculum, but not typically, not everyday talk. So more essential to cracking the academic code so that our children are able to access the curriculum. We've got efficient, rapid, reliable. They'll be used elsewhere in the curriculum. But in this ebook, we also see furnaces, population, pollution. We're going to look at factories, very specific to this time in history. And I want to show you an example of a school I work with and what's gone into the books, what the books look like. So here we have a gorgeous year 6 child, and this is their year 6 autumn term book, The Industrial Revolution. Okay, and we can see this is early September, and I think if we zoom in on the icons here, we've got them thinking about what the Industrial Revolution was and the positive impacts. So this child has been using the Inspire platform, the school are subscribers. Their child will have been onto an interactive scene. It's like they get to step back in history, listen to the sounds of the Industrial Revolution, and they're starting to glean information and very specific language about this period in history. So we're starting to see the teaching. But what we want to consider is what the impact will be. Why is it important for the children? It's not to just get them through a test so that they can reel off and record the knowledge. If they've truly mastered an understanding of this period in time and history, we'll see it elsewhere in the curriculum. Now, this group of children, these year 6 pupils, are also studying alongside the Industrial Revolution, The Selfish Giant. Classic literature. Okay, Oscar Wilde, The Selfish Giant. And this period that the book is set matches what's happening in their history. But if we look at the date here on the 21st of September, this child's made a prediction. So we can see that they mention the Victorian era because of how the clothes look. And we can see that there's some quite vague predictions. But since this lesson, this child has gone on to have a few more lessons on the Industrial Revolution. So what would we expect the impact to be in books? What would we like to see next from this child? Well, we'll hope to see that when they write their story, they put in some of this information about the Industrial Revolution. So we've got this prediction in English. Now let's go back to what they've been learning in history. Okay, so that was back on the 21st. They made a prediction. 25th of September, they've watched some of the Inspire videos. The 30th of September, they've had an Inspire lesson on the Industrial Revolution. What do we expect to see? This child in their English books, in their narrative, writing something like, gazing back at the smoke billowing from the factory furnace, how we longed to play in the giant's secret garden. Our days were long. There was little time for play. How has that child known the impact of that sentence, there was little time for play? Well, they know that because they've now had a lesson on what childhood was like for the rich and poor. They have a greater understanding of this period in history, and it's being realised as they apply it across the curriculum. And that's absolutely our goal with Inspire. We want to teach the knowledge, we want to give exposure to the reading so that the children can apply it throughout the curriculum. So I think, Luke, if it's okay with you, do you want to have a look and show our attendees today some of our Industrial Revolution lessons that would help support this child develop their vocabulary?
Yeah, we'll do that, absolutely. I need to do, before we do that though, I think it'd be quite nifty if we just slowly go into it by thinking about some of the reading strands.
Absolutely, good idea.
So again, here's our knowledge web for ancient Egypt, which we've already seen. Now, what we do is, if you think about vocabulary is absolutely redundant without context. It's the context that's going to make those words light up. It's going to drive the understanding of what the meaning of those words are. And we need context. That's why we teach in subjects. That's why as primary school teachers, we have themes and we break those themes up into different subjects. So, for example, on the screen, we've got history, geography, science. And when we click on those lessons, the expectation is that the vocabulary will be scientific language or geographical language or historical language. We want those children to be historians when we teach history. We want those children to be geographers when we teach about the River Nile. And it's the vocab that's going to drive that lesson to a really strong standard. So with that in mind, we're going to think about these reading strands. Now, I'm just going to vent a little bit of frustration with you. I hope this resonates with you because I think it resonates with a lot of teachers that I've spoken to over the last few years. What we tend to do, and I'm including myself into this, what we tend to do is we teach reading as a separate subject. We have some hour of the day where children gather together in their different groups. We may have a carousel, which drove me mental nearly, or we might have a whole class guided reading session. It's that guided reading session, and you know the story, don't you? You say to the children, right, guided reading everybody, and there's this groan in the class, and you feel it as a teacher. I don't think, and science tells us that we shouldn't think, that reading should be taught separately. Reading is not a subject. It's a mechanism of learning. Reading should be a cultural thing within the class. It should be a part of the learning process. That's what reading should be. Now, there's many strands of reading that we can deliver to the children. One of those strands is guided reading, and it's one of 6. And how many of us focus primarily on guided reading? And we're looking at retrieval, we're looking at summary, we're looking at inference, we're looking at the reading skills. But we can think of those reading skills and embed them in other different strategies. So before I share my screen with you, we're just going to have just another little activity to stop me talking for my sanity as well as yours. So the question is, how many different types of reading strategies can you name? How many different types are there? It's a really hard question because what we're doing as teachers, we're spinning plates, aren't we? We're Jeremy Kyle in the morning after break time.
We've got 5.
Right, 5. Can we name them?
Oh, Oh, we've got 3.
Right. 3.
Oh, look, did you pick up on Luke's disappointment there? 3. You didn't hide that very well, Luke. So we've got the class read, partnered read.
Class read's a good one, partner read. So we're coming up with different variations of what I'm thinking about. And the reason I'm saying this, and what we tend to do, we're all things to all men as teachers. We're, as I was just about to say, we're Jeremy Kyle in the morning after break time. We're Dr. Phil in the afternoon after lunchtime. And then in the evening time or towards the end of the day, we're kind of family therapy therapists, aren't we? We're dealing with all kinds of things as well as work politics and all the different
We're all bubble bouncers at the moment as well. You have to
really are.
the high vis and keep the bubbles.
Yeah, and in this COVID pandemic, we're adding an extra layer to that. So it's not surprising we don't go through the different reading strategies with the children. So if we go to the next slide, these are the reading strategies that we embed in most of our lessons. So we have reciprocal reads where we scaffold talk with the children and we put them in small groups and they move into different groups and student can read independently as well. We've got a closed read, which is a really focused study. We've got a shared read, which many of us would do, not knowing what it is. A shared read is the teacher models with the children read along. An independent read, that's a classic one that we do at the end of break time or at the end of lunchtime. Books out while you sort yourself out, right? That's an independent read. And then we've got a whole class read as well. So these different reading strategies can be used really specifically for different types of texts. And children read differently. We cannot just rely on the fact that all children are going to be reading independently, because I can guarantee it that if you tell children to read independently, you've got a selection of children, and we know who they're going to be, who are looking into space. They need monitoring. So maybe a reciprocal read would be good for those types of children. I would have been a reciprocal read. My wife is an English teacher. She's a closed read type of person. We all read very differently. So now I'm going to share my screen. And I'll show you, and this goes to the short read that Tara alluded to earlier. So here's our Industrial Revolution Knowledge Organizer. There again is a thematic vocabulary for this. I'll go to my knowledge web and we'll go on to one of the lessons. And I think, Tara, were you showing something to do with children in that previous?
Yeah, I'd love that, because in The Selfish Giant we have these children who break into the giant's garden desperate to play. So if we could have an understanding of these characters, it'd be great.
Yeah, so if I go into child labour, which would relate to the writing that Tara showed, here's our key vocabulary, historical vocabulary. Now what we've got underneath are different types of reading strategies. So for this one, we recommend a whole class read and a reciprocal read. And how they do it is through this, the short read. Most of our lessons have some type of short read, and we give the strategies, and those strategies are specific to the lesson content. If it was a closed read, we would expect the outcome of that lesson to be a fact file or some kind of question and answer activity. But for this one, a reciprocal read would be really good, or a whole class read together. And this is the document that they could read. And it's totally optional for the teacher. They don't need to do it. We're just giving them the options to do it. We're giving you ammunition, or probably a better word to use is the tools to deliver some really good lessons. And what this sheet can do, if you print it out, give it to the kids, it can become a working document. They can highlight. Go on, sorry.
No, I'm just thinking back to, again, the COVID, the current pandemic. You can set this in Google Classroom. This could be remote learning. This could be pre-read for the next lesson.
Absolutely.
Assign it to the children at home. They can log on. You really can be flexible with how this resource is used.
Yeah, really flexible. Brilliant for homework. It would be brilliant for, dare I say it, wet play. It could be used for registration when they come in the morning. The sheets could be on there. We could have some questions on the board for them to look into, and it becomes this working document. You could get the children to highlight some of the higher tier vocabulary, and all of our lessons. So if I just go through just one more, if I click on another one here, factories, here's our short read. And if we give them maybe 5 or 6 of these short reads, They've got a portfolio of reading material that you can evidence the reading quality in the class. And the great thing about it, you're killing 3 or 4 birds with one stone. It relates to the theme and the topic. It relates to their history lesson, their geography lesson. And the words used in these short reads are the vocabulary that's mentioned in our lesson content and our lesson plans. So those are our reading strategies, all linked in, all kind of zapped into the unit of study. Tara, I'm done now. Can I pass on to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to pull back up that Industrial Revolution ebook whilst we're talking on the Industrial Revolution, because I showed you that, but Luke and I sometimes use the word dry, and we talk about the fact that children can be given a book or a worksheet and it can sometimes be dry. You know, it's hard for the children to engage with. What I mentioned was the fact that these books are electronic, they're ebooks. They sit within our platform, they sit within our site, and you are able to access these from home. Once again, for blended learning, the children can listen to the text at the same time as reading. What we do have is each and every theme or scene that we do. So for ancient Egypt, we have 3 different ebooks. We have an ebook for the Industrial Revolution and Victorians, and they are really at the centre of much of our planning. So we have the quality text. If you think back, if I think to my local authority, if I was teaching a topic, I'd put in an order to my local library service and they would deliver a topic box. Now, for many reasons at the moment, and particularly due to COVID, that's becoming more and more difficult. We can't hand out the books. We certainly can't have the children taking the books home. Inspire Education almost brings that library service online. So if you are teaching the Mayan civilization, you will have an ebook, you will have short reads, you will have key vocabulary, and it's all sat in an online platform as a one-click solution. So your children can at any point access the resource. And what I alluded to earlier when I said we had those Year 5 children in my school who have been on computer games, is if we can almost trick our children into reading and they're playing a game and looking at the different characters working in the factory, but in doing so online, there's exposure to text. In that way, everyone's winning. We've got great blended learning. It's happening at home. It's happening on the kids' iPads at the start of the day during registration, and it's happening in your lesson. And that's when we'll see impact. So let's look. Here is our Industrial Revolution scene. The train's going past. Children can log on to this and click on. We just are focusing on reading today. So I want to show you what the book looks like in this context.
So going to the ebook, so every unit of study has a variety of different ebooks. So I'm going to show you the one on the Industrial Revolution. And what we do is we're breaking it down. So as I play this, I'm going to play the audiobook version of it. As I play it, have a little think on why this would be really useful for children lower down on the language spectrum. We're talking about those children who can only access the majority of the lower tier vocab. So just have a little think about the way it plays, the way it sounds. Why would that be useful? I don't need responses because we'll just go through it. So I'll play that.
The Industrial Revolution. For thousands of years, the majority of the British population lived peaceful lives in the countryside. In fact, countryside was all there was. By 1760, this was beginning to change. New farming tools and machines meant that farmers needed fewer workers. Meanwhile, the invention of new machines, tools and processes were turning small towns into industrial cities.
Okay, so hopefully you had a little think about that. Why would that be really useful? There's a number of things. And I'm going to back all this up with science and research. We know that music acts as a narrative. If you're anything like me, if I watch a film, I can recall events of the film based upon the music, the soundtrack I listened to afterwards, because I'm like that, love the music of film. I can listen to the music and I remember specific moments. So music acts as a recall. Sound effects as well. So for example, if you're hearing the word sarcophagus, that word is related to the sound effect of a tomb opening, like a creaking sound. And so the audio book is exposing to the children, not only to the words, but to the sounds that relate to the words as well. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to hit long-term memory as quickly as possible. Now, the audiobook you just heard relates to an ebook. And again, I know I'm showing you a load of stuff here, but in training, this is made very, very clear how to use it. So if I go into the curriculum reading, we've got stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. Essentially, that basically means easy, middle, hard, right? So if I go to the hard one, I go to stage 3. Here is the ebook that Tara's already shown you. So if I open that up, you can see the ebook, all the vocabulary is in there, and it basically just gives a snapshot of what the Industrial Revolution is. Before the children start learning about the Industrial Revolution through different subjects, they've got to have just a brief snapshot, just a basic understanding of what the Industrial Revolution is. And these ebooks do that. They provide almost like a blurb of the subject. So I can play the audiobook. The audiobook relates exactly to the text. I can print the text off here. I can print it off and give it to the children. But if I go to the end, I've got my glossary, the glossary of words with meanings. And at the end of every one of our texts, we have this section here. It says, use the side tabs to answer questions on the text you have just read. Ask your teacher to find out which one to do. You will be tested on the following 4 types of questions: meaning, retrieval, summary, and inference. Now, immediately we know that those 4 question types there are the reading skills. We do this every day. We have to teach them retrieval, inference, summary. These are the 4 main ones. These are the 4 that they're going to be tested on the most in their final assessment.
I was just going to say, Luke, I think our year 6 teachers at this point will be thinking, fantastic, because we know at the end of the day, we've got reading papers to sit. So whilst it's lovely to have this exposure to the vocabulary, we've got to still train our children up to access a reading paper and to answer questions.
Yeah, precisely. Right. So my question is, I think we have a poll for this. Because I did this last minute. I asked our techie guy to do this last minute. Yeah, we go. So what reading skill do you focus on in the class mostly? Would it be retrieval, inference, summary, or meaning? So if you respond with those questions, I'm gonna do one. I'm gonna do this because I know for a fact I do a lot of retrieval.
Yeah, retrieval's proving popular here, Luke.
Yeah, it's no surprise. Retrieval is one of those classic ones where we get them to recall from a text, but it's only a smaller proportion of their final assessment. Inference is absolutely rock hard to question, isn't it? But inferring through a theme is really, really straightforward. So at the end of our text, we've got these little question tags: beginner, intermediate, advanced, right? So we've got 3 different types of text and 9 types of question cut across those 3 texts. So we've got a real good amount of differentiation going on here. So if I go on our intermediate, I've got here an online question sheet. I can print these off and give them a comprehension, and I can get them to do it electronically, give them as homework, and can do it in a multiple different amounts of ways. But comprehension is how we're going to assess children on their reading. We could give them a whole class read, a reciprocal read, a shared read, a guided read, a closed read, all these different types of reading strategies. But at the end of the day, comprehension is how we're going to assess them on their understanding. And I could do this as a teacher now with my whiteboard on the screen, sorry, with this on the whiteboard showing on the screen, and I could give them these questions and I could do it as a whole class. On your whiteboard, children, what's the response? And they put A, B, C, D, or E down.
Yeah, we've seen this work well with intervention groups. If you've got a specific group of children that might need that additional time to access the text and work through the questions, we know that our TAs have really valued having the beginner, intermediate and advanced to kind of be able to perhaps share the beginner but take some of their questioning further with the intermediate. So this is a very, very useful teaching tool that I am sure you recognise would have great impact in the classroom, in interventions, at home or at homework. Luke, we are into our last 10 minutes. It's now 10 to 5.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, because I just know what I mentioned at the start, and we're desperate to show our attendees today, is that we also have some really strong links with Philosophy for Children, with P4C. And we have thought very carefully, not just about technical vocabulary, but the importance of words and reading and using our words. So we're going to share with you an example. I think we're going to pop to Maya. We're going to go to the Mayan civilization here now, Luke.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So we have worked in collaboration, in partnership with P4C, with Philosophy for Children, to develop questions linked to a theme. So if you were quite probably in year 5, you're looking at a non-European civilization in contrast, and you'd want to consider the following. So Luke, over to you. Do you want to talk us through this chap? I can see he's got the helmet on. Where's he come from?
Well, we're in ancient Maya, so we know the Maya didn't wear helmets and didn't dress like this, but we know that the Spanish did. And the Spanish were one of the key figures in the Maya history who became what we know today as modern-day Mexico. And modern-day Mexico, they speak Spanish, because what we find out is that the Spanish invaded and conquered the Maya civilization and converted them to Christianity, converted their language to their Spanish language. And so it all started out from a discovery, didn't it? Where various people from Spain explored the seas and came to the Maya civilization. So one of the key themes in the Maya theme is discovery. And so that's our P4C activity. And what P4C is going to allow the children to do is explore language and vocabulary that's higher from that third tier vocab. Okay, so if we think about this, we've got two. That's my washing machine, by the way. So it's not time's up, just the washing machine. But if I go through some of these questions, you can see we've got 2 different types of questions. We've got the green and the blue that then come towards this higher level thinking question. We want the children to think beyond the subject of the Maya. We want them to think laterally, exploratively. We want them to think really exponentially on these different types of concepts. So our overall question is it better to discover something huge or lots of small things? Explain your reasons. And they can only answer that great theme, that great question through the theme of the Maya. And the green questions relate to the subject. They need knowledge. You know, in the 16th century, the Spanish discovered the Maya civilizations. What did they discover? They need to understand the subject matter to be able to tackle the green question. But when we come to the blue questions, they then start relating it to themselves, thinking about how this impacts them as people. And then in the white question, they're able to challenge them these overarching conceptual ideas that will impact their writing. So I'm going to give you a very short anecdote of an example in which when I was in a school, and I was there to look at some of the vocab in their books, in their English. I was looking through some of their cross-curricular, and I know it was a Year 6 class, and they were looking at William Shakespeare. And one of the texts that they were reading was Romeo and Juliet. And the head teacher asked me what I thought on the vocabulary. And I felt really brave that day. I may have had too many coffees, right? Or a big sugar rush, because I ended up saying, I think the language could be deeper. Of course, the head teacher disagreed with me. So I set up a challenge and said, right, get your brightest writer, the best writer you think, and we'll have a little go together, see what we think. And of course, this girl walked in. It had to be a girl, didn't it? She walked in and she was clutching in her hands her English book. And she was in front of myself and a few members of SLT. So she was quite nervous, as I was as well, because everything was brinking on this challenge. So I asked this young girl and said, "What are you doing at the moment in your topic book?" She said, "William Shakespeare." I said, "Wow, that's really good." She went, "Yes, it is good." I said, "What are you learning about in regards to William Shakespeare?" She said, "Well, we're learning at the moment some of his plays, and we're reading about Romeo and Juliet." I said, "Is that some of your work that's showing Romeo and Juliet?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Yes." I said, "Can you use one word that describes the story of Romeo and Juliet? Give me one summary word." And she used the word love. She was absolutely right. It was an amazing summary word, because that's what the story of Romeo and Juliet is. It's a tragic love story. I said, "Can you recall any of the sections in the text?" And she said, "Yes." She could quote some of the script, and she could quote some of she could recall some of the times in which the Capulets and the Montagues were at war with one another. So she could recall really well. I wanted to zone in on this one word, love, because at the end of the day, that's the summary word. So I asked this young girl, "Can you describe for me what love is?" And of course, she had no answer. What do you think she did? Well, she related it to her mom and dad. "I love my mom and dad." I said, "Well, talk to me about your mom and dad." And she said, "Well, I love mom and dad because they took me on holiday last summer. And they buy me and my brother lots of presents at Christmas. And we go out for meals." And of course, her relationship with her mom and dad on the basic level is how they look after her. Because she's 10, she has no experience of what true love is. Only life can teach us what love is. So how can we expect the children to write about these great themes, these great ideas, these great words, without knowing what they are? And so the P4C activities allow these children to think about these massive, big concepts that are beyond their years, so that then they write about it, they're able to talk about it. So that's what P4C is all about. And that's why we build it in to many, many of our thematic approaches. Thank you.
Thanks, Luke. Well, that's great, because you've left everybody leaving today thinking about love. What a brilliant way to wrap up our Monday. So we've shared with you lots of examples of reading within the Inspire platform there, and that's fantastic. What we do also want to do is support you the best we can. We've had quite a few schools get in touch recently because, of course, we now have the Coronavirus Education Act. We know our schools have to have remote education provision, that was hard to say, by the end of September. Must be in place. And we're now looking at it being a legal requirement in October. So our curriculum offer as any school must be able to go online. We need our children to access it from home. And you saw there a wealth of activities and reading, short reads, EBooks that children can access from their own homes, and they can have a remote learning experience. You don't know a lot about Inspire. We are not a full curriculum. We're not trying to say, here's a curriculum, pick it up and run with this. We are a fantastic range of resources, all at your fingertips and backed up. I think you pick up on that when you hear Luke talk, and he's the founder of this. It's a lot of research into the pedagogy, how we're going to have impact in the classrooms and make a difference for our children. So if you would like to get in touch with Luke or myself, our email addresses are here. That is our third webinar in a series. So we have done 3 webinars, and if you enjoyed this one and missed the previous 2, we have put them on YouTube. So you can go back and watch them. And I think that teachers at the moment are finding it so hard to be here for 4 o'clock. So lots of people are accessing them and rewatching them on YouTube, please do. And if you have any questions, we're more than happy to help. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone.